Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial on our session on LabVIEW. So the purpose of this session is basically to introduce you to some fundamentals of LabVIEW. We had a good session in the lab yesterday, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and reiterate some of the important things, and we will build on from there. So let's see what this is. Fundamentally, you see two windows when you open a new project. One of them is a block diagram, the other is a front panel. The analogy that I often run with this is it is similar to a CPU or a computer or a laptop, where you have some buttons and LEDs on your front side and front panel, and then all the logic is implemented inside the computer, inside the machine itself. That inside where you implement the logic and you make all the connections and the wiring and everything, that's your block diagram. This is where that happens. The front panel is where the user interacts with your system. It's where the switches are supposed to be, the indicators, or the lights, LEDs. That's all supposed to be on the front panel. So that's what the inherent logic of the entire scheme is, and we're going to keep that in mind when we're going to place our objects. Now, for each of these, block diagram and the front panel, there is a dedicated palette associated with it. And if for some reason you are not seeing your palette, like I'm not seeing my palette, I don't know where it went. I probably closed it down. If you click on them, you should be able to see your palettes. But in case, just like me, you ended up closing them for some reason and it's not appearing, the way to get it is by clicking on view and look at controls palette. If you click on view in the block diagram, you should be able to see the functions palette. So that way you also know that for the block diagram there's a functions palette, and for the front panel there's a controls palette. So when you have these palettes available, there are a bunch of options that you could choose them from. The way to navigate through them is by just clicking on them or by clicking on this triangular arrow, and then you should be able to see multiple folders in them. When you see multiple folders in them, you could further go into them and choose something that you want, but to navigate out of that folder is by just clicking on that, and then you should be able to come out of it easily. Let's see, and if you're looking for something, you'd probably type in the search. Maybe if I'm looking for an AND gate, I should be able to get some AND gates, and similarly, if you're looking for something, you could always search for it. But I would encourage you to actually go into these particular folders so you're able to see what else is there, right? You have AND, OR, and other gates as well. So I would encourage you to, instead of searching, go ahead into these folders and see what other options are there. In the customize, you should be able to see different options. I would recommend you to set it up as category, icons, and text, so that you know what the icon is, and you could also read what the name is for that option. So for example, if I am here and if I change it to only icons, I'm only going to see icons, and then sometimes if the name is not there, it's hard to tell which is what, right? Although it still brings up some explanation over there, but I would recommend you to keep it as icons and text so that you know exactly what you're looking at. That is there. Let's go ahead with one example. Let's set up a simple system. For example, let me go ahead and set up an LED that I would probably want to turn on through a toggle switch. Notice each time I place something here, I would see a corresponding icon on the back panel. This is so that I could make the wiring and the connections and basically implement the logic inside the machine in the block diagram. And having these windows set up side by side, the block diagram and the front panel side by side, allows me to recognize and appreciate that indeed each time I drop something in the front panel, there is a corresponding icon in the block diagram. So it's easier to visualize this as well. And then I could simply go ahead and make the connections. Now, if you also encounter this like I'm encountering this, I'm unable to, drag it. I can drag it, but I cannot seem to make a wired connection between them. If this happens, you could always get to view And look at the tools palette. This is another palette that we have, a tools palette. So the tools palette will let you make, there's a bunch of options right here. There's a wiring, and then there's pan and everything. But the wiring is what we're interested in. We want to set up a wire from this to this, and then we could choose our cursor back to, drag and everything. So once this has been done, your logic is complete and you could run it. But remember, when you run it, this gives you an option to run it just once. So running it once means it just flows through it, but we're more interested in running it continuously. So it's just, think of it as looping it again and again, right? So it's just looping it, it's just running again and again, and this way we are able to use it as a properly turned on machine, as an application. So now we're able to control the LED through a switch. Right, so that's a simple example, but I will leave you with some of the things that for you to go ahead and try yourself. This is, by the way, the abort execution and pause execution buttons. There are more options right here, and those help you in debugging by stepping or moving through the processes one by one, rotating the values in the wires. I encourage you to check these out on your own. However, I leave you with some of the things that you should definitely do. For example, we know that we just saw that this turns on each time the switch is toggled upwards. Is there a way I could turn it on by having the switch toggled downwards? Could I invert this operation? Would I need a NOT gate here, or could I rotate this, or could I set its default arrangement, perhaps the other way around? Yeah, so I would leave that to you as an exercise to figure that out. However, there are many things that you could do, such as you could go ahead and change the sizing on these, right? You could change the dimensions of these. You could also change their names by double clicking on them, or lock label, vertical arrangement, properties. Yeah, so there's, or you could also even put in a text on your own. LED app. So let's just call it an LED app. Yeah. So there's a bunch of things that you could go ahead and do with these, and you're encouraged to do these because, right, you're encouraged to go ahead and try these different things with this, and see where that goes. Another important, interesting things that we are probably going to be dealing more with are these Boolean Gates, as well as some of the numeric indicators. You could also see you have some constants here. These are true and false constants that you might want to try out if you want to give a constant logic to perhaps a gate, or to an LED, or in any system that you want to implement. There are also comparisons available here. You might want to add two numbers and see if they equal, and it leads to a high logic, and then that would probably turn on or off some things. Similarly, you might want to check out these different comparison operations. So I'm going to go ahead and leave you with this, and then from here on we're going to continue with our discussion. Remember, the switches act as controls. You might not want to change them as to indicators. The LEDs, etc., these are indicators which indicate some output. You do not want to change them as control. You do not want to control a switch from an LED. So make sure you have your indicators and controls correctly set up with correct types, so it's easy for you to get through your application. Alright, if there are any questions, we will take it in the comments, or you can email me. We are going to discuss this in the next session anyway. Right. Thank you so much.